What's up, YouTube? I want to talk about how the political parties have gotten established. And now this is really important that you got to understand. You have a president who creates a movement, or somebody who creates a political era. And then you'll have somebody who usually is classified as a failure, who is the end of that era. Like, we had Andrew Jackson, who created the Jacksonian era for the Southern Democrats, and then you had James Buchanan, who was just the end of that, and it was done with him. It was the end of that time. It just wasn't going to work with the present situation. And so you got to look at, like, during the Great Depression, you had a lot of people out of work, and so the government believed during the New Deal and FDR's programs that they needed to intervene in the situation and create more public works, build infrastructure, and put people to work doing stuff. And so there was a lot of polarization with that, because there were people who liked those policies and people who despised them. And so that is one thing that we see in the system. And you also see people like Reagan, who brought the Republican Party to a national stage. And he created a lot of the trickle-down economics and how to do tax incentives and tax breaks and how to reduce the size of government and a lot of these policies that people want to still follow. And so this is where there's a lot of people who create the movement. And like, we got to look back in history. Abraham Lincoln created the Republican Party, and he was from the industrialized North. And so after him, they were more and more for the big businesses, because that was the Industrial Revolution, and they helped create the Industrial Revolution. And so then you have the Democrats that create the civil rights, and so they have a lot of people on their side for the civil rights issues. And at the same time, there's migrations. I mean, a lot of people have asked a question. The Southern Democrats in the Civil War seem like, today's Republicans. Or people will say that the Republicans in the Civil War seem like today's Democrats, or stuff like that. And the real truth is that during the civil rights, when they did the desegregation, there were some people that were mad. But during the Vietnam War, when people pulled the plug on that operation, a lot of the Democrats were furious, and they said, "You are not part of this country anymore. This is not a national party. You guys have left us." And they were really mad that they had ended this project. And they were really angry when they saw people like Jimmy Carter, who ended the Egypt project when all these extremists didn't want U.S. influence there. And he would kind of give in, and he was weak, and so that's where you get the term terrorist appeasing liberal. And you get a lot of these situations where political parties will come into power, and then you'll have the end of that power, and it'll give rise to something else. And basically, during the 80s, the religion part brought a lot of people into the Republican Party, and it really brought the Republican Party to a national audience. And during the 70s, Nixon started putting state rights into the Republican Party's agenda, even though it was almost always in there. But Nixon really pushed that and had the Southern Compromise, and you had a lot of people who would push more and more with the small government. I mean, Herbert Hoover believed it wasn't the government's job to intervene with the economy, but the government has become more and more carved out to support groups. And Herbert Hoover's ideology isn't used as much anymore, because a lot of times you'll have Democrats that give tax breaks and certain programs for their support for lower income, and then you'll have Republicans that'll give that for higher income, and they'll have like corporate welfare where they do tax breaks for businesses. And so the government really is getting involved in the economy, and they really are spending. And Ron Paul is the only true fiscal conservative, because everybody else in both parties is going to spend. and get involved in the economy in some way, shape, or form. And at the same time, it all depends on the Keynesian system, because you have a certain amount of jobs and people pumping money through the economy, and if people have trust and they are optimistic, they'll keep buying, and then people keep their payrolls high. And when people stop buying stuff and the economy starts to slump and they start pulling out of the stock market, then the stocks start to fall, and you can have a crash, and all these people get laid off, and there's less people that are helping businesses, and so people end up in a depression or a recession, depending on how much unemployment there is. But it also depends on where the money's flowing. Like, if you look at foreign policy and economics, it's good to create a business that'll sell on the international scale to get money from other countries flowing into your country. And China has done a big job of making sure that they can manufacture items cheaper than they would be in other countries, and so a lot of money goes into China. And that's where the Chinese have a rapidly growing economy, even with the economic downturn. And they have had their dollar set lower than the US dollar, so people can buy more of theirs than they can buy in the US. And so these are things to consider. And when it comes to economics, the government can get involved in the economy, but it has to be strategic, and they have to do it just right. Because if you put people to work and put everyone to work, it's just going to cost a lot of money. It's important to put just the right amount of people to work so they can pump money through the economy, and it comes right back out in taxes without having too much debt. So that's basically one point of this. But the economy is one of the big things that drives this. And you'll have economic policies that create the necessity. And like during the Great Depression, FDR provided programs that a lot of people benefited from, so they were out of work, and so they voted for him. Lincoln, on the other hand, had better economic management than James Buchanan by a long shot. And so he really created era and brought people into his political system. And the Republicans that were in the Industrial Revolution Party created jobs by helping out the industries. And so this is where they have gotten themselves into certain eras, and they have definitely gotten certain support. And then during the 60s, the welfare movement brought some people to the Democratic Party. And some other people felt like it was too much of an expansion of government, and so they felt like we should not be taxed to help support somebody who doesn't want to work. And so it really went both ways, because you had some people that were now going to see this support group and some other people who hated it. And that's where the economy really can do a lot of things with politics. And it can really make or break a presidency. And like Jimmy Carter really did not handle the economy well. And he just didn't he tried some radical plan that didn't work, and he lost in a landslide. And basically, on the other hand, there's also trends. Like a lot of political campaigners have gotten in there, and they've taken the politicians aside, and they've said, okay, you need this percentage of the vote to win. And so you've got to put this stuff in your agenda. You've got to talk more about certain issues, and that way you can bring people to the table. And a lot of times people will then campaign on certain issues, and they'll look at what will get me voted or not. And so that's where the parties have become carved out the way they are. And the personal, social, and religious issues used to never be in politics, but now they are, because a lot of campaigners have seen them as inflaming issues that have to be addressed in order to get people onto the ticket. So basically that's just a few issues, and thanks for watching.